Okay, so here we go. Now I'm working with a Caron Simply Soft medium weight yarn. On the package you'll see that it recommends a size H hook. I'm actually using a size J because it's going to be a little bit easier to see what I'm doing with a bigger needle. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about holding the yarn. I've seen a lot of different ways. When I watch YouTube videos about crochet, I am simply amazed sometimes, to be honest, how people make it work, but this is how I was taught to do it. So the thing about keeping tension, proper tension on the line, is that you want all of your stitches to be the same size, and tension's the way to go for that. So how I was taught is to wrap down here around your pinky finger. This is my left hand because my right hand is dominant. So wrap around the pinky, kind of keeping it in that second knuckle area so that it's easy to move as you're working on it, right? Because that's the end that's attached to the skein. So you wrap, and then you come up around behind your forefinger, and then I hold my work right here between my middle and thumb. Okay, so the thing about having it wrapped up here on your forefinger is that you could move your forefinger up and down. See, and it's pulling yarn from here when I need it, but it's also keeping proper tension right here on so that each stitch I put in ends up being the same size. Okay, so let's watch that one more time. Wrap up and around behind, and then hold. Okay, easy. Now you're going to start with a chain stitch. Now the chain is going to be your foundation stitch for just about anything that you do in crochet. Okay, I've seen a lot of complicated ways to get started, but the way that I like to do it is you just make a loop with your yarn. I just make a loop. The top comes over. This is your short end, and then it comes back behind and underneath and then through and pull. Okay, so that gives you a loop that is adjustable and pulls out. Okay, so once again, loop, your short end comes over top, back underneath, and through. Okay, so this is what you attach to your hook, and this is how you start. Okay, so basically the whole thing about crochet is that you're pulling loops through loops, right? You're building loops upon loops. So you want to wrap your yarn and then pull it through that loop that's on the hook. Alright, and that gives you your first chain stitch. And then you do that again. So you wrap and pull, and wrap and pull, and wrap and pull. Okay, so what you end up with is a bunch of V shapes, and these V's are your stitches. So wrap and pull, and wrap and pull, and wrap and pull. Okay, and you do that to your heart's content until you have enough stitches, you know, based on what your pattern says, or however long you're trying to make whatever it is you're making. Now it's important to count your stitches if you're doing something specific. Right now I'm not, because we're just practicing. But when you're making something, it is important to count these stitches, because you're going to work back across them, putting your first row of actual stitches in, and you're going to if you come to, you know, the end of a sequence or a pattern that does something specific or looks a certain way, and you have extra, you're going to have to pull them out from that side, and that's annoying. Or, you know, you end up with too few, and then, you know, you have to start all over again, and you don't realize it until you get to the very end of, your first row, and then you have to pull all that work out. So I'm just going to do this a few more times. Now wrap and pull, wrap and pull. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter how you pull, you know, from which side you like to wrap. That's the motion that I've learned, is to come around that way. You could come this way and pull it through just the same, you know, and you still end up with a loop. I like to do it this way because it's more natural to me that way. So if you look now at your chain, you've got V's, and on the back you've got these little ridges. They're bumpy, and you can kind of feel them when you do this. And that's the back side of your chain. So your most basic building stitch in crochet is going to be the single crochet. And when you single crochet, when you start out from your chain on a single crochet, you're going to put your hook to start your first stitch. You're going to put your hook in the second loop from it. Okay, so here we have the loop. We have the loop on the hook that doesn't count. Okay, that's not a stitch yet, so that doesn't count. Then you have one loop and two loops. Okay, so you want to go into the second loop, and you can just catch that top part of the V, wrap, and pull through again. And now you have two. And then to finish the stitch, you're going to pull through both of those loops. Okay, so you have a stitch. When your stitch is done, you've got one loop on the top, or on your hook. Okay, so let's try that again. So I'm just going to go into the immediate next chain stitch. I'm just going to stick my hook through that top loop, wrap, and pull, and then wrap and pull again, and we finish the stitch. Okay, so you got two stitches. Now I'm going to do that a few more times. Okay, wrap and pull, and then wrap and pull again. See, now when you're working on a project, it's also important to count these stitches as you go back, so that you know how many you have in each row, so that you don't inadvertently add stitches or decrease stitches, and if you do that, the edges of your project will start looking scawampus, and it'll pull weird, and it'll just be weird. So it's important to count as you go back this way to make sure that you put the same number of stitches in the first row as you were supposed to. Okay, and that you didn't skip you didn't skip a loop or something. Okay, so we're just continuing on down the row. Top loop, through, wrap, and pull, and then wrap and pull again. Alright, and this is what we're building. Now you'll see, again, with the V's. Okay, this is how you know where your stitches are. V, 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 V. Those are your stitches right there. And those are what you're going to, when you come back across in the other direction in your second row, you'll be putting each second stitch into the top of these V's. Alright, so let's get down to the end of that row. Okay, so put it through, pull, put it through, wrap, pull, wrap, and pull again. Okay, and your stitch is finished when you've got that one loop back on the hook. Alright, so I'm just going to finish this real quick. It's kind of weird to do this into the camera, I'm not going to lie. Alright. Alright, so we're now at our very last chain. That's the beginning, slip knot that you made. You're going to go in through the top and just do your stitch like that again. Okay, and the great thing about this is if you end up with kind of a gap like that, you can just pull this and it closes right up. It's beautiful. Okay, now let's talk about turning. So here's your first row. Well, obviously you have your foundation chains, but that doesn't count. And then you have your first row of stitches. Okay, so when you get to the end of a single crochet line, it's important that you put in a chain stitch. Just wrap and pull. Okay, that's a chain stitch at the end of your line, and that's going to essentially serve, because what you're going to do is you're going to turn your work around. See, that's the back side. And you're going to work your stitches into these V's. See the V's? So when you come back, you're going to, since that chain stitch acts as your first stitch of that second row, you're not going to change it into this. You see this hole right here? You're going to be tempted to stitch into that, but don't, because you've already got this chain right here to act as your first stitch. So you go into the second one, and you catch both loops of that V. I don't know if you can really see it, but see, I count both loops of that V. Okay, then you just wrap and pull the same as you did before. See, and you got one other stitch. Alright, and then you go in again, catch both loops of that V, pull through, okay? See, and that's how your piece is going to work up in a single crochet. Now, the great thing about single crochets is that they essentially make a square. The stitch is essentially a square, and when you have a sheet of these single crochets, you could actually cross stitch into it very easily, because the stitches line up one on top of each other, and they have 4 holes around which you can cross stitch into. So that's my favorite thing about the single crochet stitch, and that's usually why I would do it, is because it's a little square and it makes for really easy and awesome pattern making. You know, you can change colors and, you know, go off of a graph and change colors so that you're essentially, you know, crocheting a pattern into another color, which is one of my favorite things to do. So, anyway, what we're doing here is we're moving back across this row. Alright, so we're catching those top 2. You see the V right there. I'm catching both of those, and the easiest way is just to kind of put the hook's point right here by this ridge and push in, and then wrap and pull through, and then wrap and pull through again. Just loops on loops and loops. Okay? So that's your basic single crochet stitch. And join us next time for something a little bit more complicated.